So as I've said, our last topic, it's on inheritance. But if you look at my course outline, there's some notes on polymorphism. I, I believe that's something you can be able to walk through yourself and try to understand the concept. So, sorry, we won't be able to get time to go through polymorphism. It's something maybe I thought we could be able to get time to look at. But the fact that this is our last week, the fact that we are starting the exams next week, then we are not able to we are not able to look at that chapter at this time. And before we proceed, we also need to agree. Are we going to have the cut on Saturday, the one we agreed on, the makeup cut? Will we have the makeup cut on Saturday as agreed? So that I don't set a cut where people will not be able to show. Will we have the cut on Saturday? Or we are okay with the marks we got for cut one? For cut one, I think most of us say they are very okay with what they have scored. But do we still continue and have the cut on Saturday? Class.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes, Ian.
Will the cut be okay? Will the cut be like whatever we get there will replace what we had in cut one, or it will be additional marks?
You know, we are supposed to do 2 cuts. We have just done 1 cut.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So, okay. Can I just say it's not negotiable that the cut has to be done? The fact that the policy is that we have to do 2 cuts.
So I think Saturday is okay.
Okay, then it's okay. Let's meet at our usual time at 2:30. So we can proceed. So our last topic, although let me just say it's the last topic, but not the last topic, it's on something on inheritance. Sorry, and at the end of the topic, we want to be able to understand how C++ as a programming language will be able to implement this object-oriented programming feature we call inheritance. These are one of the key pillars of any object-oriented programming. And the reasoning is you want to be able to borrow some properties. You want to be able to acquire some objects, or some characteristics from another existing object, instead of you having to redefine those properties, instead of you having to redefine the methods again. So this is one of the most important concepts in object-oriented programming, whereby we can have a certain object or a certain class trying to acquire what we call deriving objects and characteristics. And what we mean by these characteristics will mean both the data and functions from another object. And we said class and objects can be used interchangeably. So when we have a class trying to acquire characteristics from another class, then we do call this one inheritance. So through this concept, then we can be able to have an hierarchy of classes. And at the end of the day, the programmer will be able to have some hierarchy of classes. Starting from the most general class, then you move on to the most specific class. So we just need to know these 2 terms, that in inheritance, we talk about the child class. Sometimes some books will call this child class the subclass or the derived class. This shall be that class that shall acquire properties from the base class or from the parent class. Then we also have the term the base class. This one refers to that object or to that class whereby we shall be getting the properties, that is the methods, that is the functions and data from. Sometimes we also call this class the superclass or the base class. And the main advantage you get when you do when you write your programs using inheritance, it's that you can be able to reuse the same code. So if you have a certain class that has a certain code, and you acquire properties from that class, as we are going to see in some few minutes, then you can be able to reuse the same code. And we can say that the child class can be able to use properties from the base class, but it's not the other way around. We can't have the base class assessing members in the derived class, because you find that even the base class is not even aware about this inheritance. It's the child that will be aware of the inheritance. So through inheritance, we can be able to reuse the same code. And that will mean you don't need to keep on duplicating the same code. You don't need to keep on rewriting the same code to do the same thing over and over again. And this one can be able to fast track the process of implementing your program, because you are not starting from scratch every time you are working on your programs. So we just look at some few real life examples before we can be able to see how inheritance can work. So let's look at this class we are calling vehicle. So we want to look at the real life example. So we assume that we do have a, sorry, just a minute. So let's assume that we have a class that we call the human, or a person, and this class will have some attributes like height, will have an attribute like weight, color, and other properties which are associated with person. And definitely a person will be able to do something. That person can be able to eat. That person can be able to sleep. That person can be able to dream, walk, etc. And these are what we are calling the functionality of this class we are calling person. Remember, we have decided to take real life examples. Now we create another class which we call the male and female. These classes are different, but since both the male and the female are all persons, they are all humans, then they might share the same common properties, all behaviors. For example, a female and male, they will be able to eat, they will be able to sleep, dream, work, and so on and so on. They'll also have height, they'll have weight, color, or what we call complexion. Let me not just call it color, and so on and so on. So in this case, instead of defining these properties again in the class we are calling male and female, we can just make the class male and female inherit the properties from the class we are calling human. And this case, this class we are calling human becomes my base class, while male and female becomes my derived class. That class that will be acquiring properties from another class. This is just a real life example. So we look at example number 2. So we consider a group of vehicles that we do have bus, we do have car, and we also do have truck. The operations that can apply to all those vehicles, they can be able to fuel, or they can have a class they can have a function we call fuel amount, for example, capacity, apply brakes, and so on and so on. So all these ones will apply in the same class. So if we create these classes without inheritance, then this is what we are going to be having. For class bus, we shall be able to have the methods, the functions, fuel amount, capacity, apply brake. The same will apply to the class car and truck. And if we look at that example, it's a clear way whereby we are duplicating the same code. If we can now if we can now take advantage of inheritance instead of defining our program in this manner, then we can define one class. Maybe we can even call it vehicle, and vehicle will be able to have all these functions defined within that class. So it's very clear that we are doing duplication from the above, and we can now be able to define another class that will be able to have the common behavior for all the three classes. So, and that's what we have been able to have in the next diagram. So we define a class we are calling vehicle, and this class we are calling vehicle will have the three functions: fuel amount, capacity, and also apply brakes. Then we do have the three classes, that is bus, car, and truck, inheriting from the class vehicle. That means we don't need to redefine again fuel amount, capacity, and apply brake functions in the bus, car, and truck. And through that, we can be able to eliminate duplication of the code. So we also look at example number 3, which is also a real life example. We assume we are working on a solution consisting of 3 characters. We have a math teacher, a footballer, and a businessman. Since all these are characters pointing to one class, which we are calling person, then definitely they can be able to talk, they can be able to walk, and many other functions. Just a minute. And many other functions. But they may have some special skills. For example, we can have a math teacher who can teach mathematics. A footballer can play football, and a businessman can be able to run a business. So this one is another different form of inheritance, where you find that, yes, we do have some common behavior among our 3 classes, but you find that each of that class will be adding some additional individual behavior. For example, the class we are calling math teacher can be able to have a function which is teach maths. That one should not be accessible to the other class. There's something I want to talk about inheritance. Inheritance is not just about getting properties from another object. It's about getting properties from another object and maybe adding some additional behavior to the new class. So it's not just about duplicating what is in another class. You can be able to acquire what is in another class, but once you acquire what's in another class, you add some additional behavior. So for these 3 classes, we need the same code for walk and talk operations. And that means that one shall now become our base class. If, let's say, we want to add some new feature, for example, each, the same code has also to be implemented for each class, making the program error-prone, as well as duplicating the codes. How do we simplify this program? I think the next picture captures that very well. The common attributes, we are going to put them in a certain base class. For example, person, we have put person in, we have put the function talk, walk, eat in a certain class. And that's what we are calling the base class. But our 3 classes, the teach maths, play football, which is a function, and run business, are now found in another class. We are all on their respective classes. But the fact that a math teacher can be able to do some additional behavior, you find that a math teacher has a function we call teach maths, which is not accessible to the other classes. And for footballer, we have play football function. Business, we have the run business function. So that means if we can take an example of this class we are calling business, this class will have 4 members as it looks. the run business function, the eat function, which we are inheriting, walk and talk. So when you are constructing your programs, don't have the illusion that inheritance is just about acquiring properties from another object. You can acquire and add some additional behavior in, when you are doing inheritance. So we can just proceed. So the overall effect of having inheritance, it's trying to come up with a code that will be more clean and that is more understandable and executable. And I think once you have done some few programs, you'll be able to appreciate what inheritance can be able to do for us in our program. But you need to note that inheritance will be able to inherit all the class functions, all the class methods, but the following members will not be inherited. We don't inherit constructors. We don't inherit the destructors. We don't inherit the copy constructors of the base class. So those members can never be inherited in the new class. Number two, we can also not be able to inherit an overloaded operator. And I thought this is something we'd be able to look at. Once you have an operator, for example, plus, and you define another function for that operator, that's what we call operator overloading. Definitely, we know that the plus symbol is supposed to be doing mathematical addition. But if you can be able to define an additional function for that operator, then we can say that operator will be an overloaded operator. And that operator will not be inherited in from the base class. If we do have a friend function, and we looked at the friend functions last week, then that friend function can also not be inherited in the new class. First, we said a friend function will not be within the scope of the class it's defined. And it's therefore obvious that that member can never be inherited by a child class. Lastly, we are not able to inherit the private members in a class. Actually, those members will never be accessible outside the class they have been able to be defined. So even if we try to access them, so even if we try to inherit all the members, the private members will never be inherited in a new class. So we just continue. So let's see how we do them, or how we implement inheritance in C++. Then we can do a small example, then proceed. So to create a derived class or a child class in C++, then we shall use this syntax. The keyword class, followed by the name of the derived class, what we are calling the subclass. Then the full colon in C++ denotes that we are actually doing inheritance. We now tell the compiler the access mode, and we can either access a class as private, public, or protected. We will talk about these modes in a minute. Then we now tell the compiler which is the base class where we are getting these members from. And inside the class, we have the class, the start of the class, end of the class, and the body of the class. The normal way we have the body of the class. So at this point, we can implement our functions. We can declare our variables of the class. But that will be the syntax of defining or implementing inheritance in C++. So in this case, we mean the subclass will be able to be the name of the derived class. That class that will be able to acquire members from the other class, it's what we are calling the subclass. The access mode will be able to tell the compiler how are we inheriting the members. Are we going to make them public in the new class? Are we going to make them protected in the new class? Or do we intend to make them public within the new class? So definitely once we inherit by public inheritance, there are going to be some effects on the base class members, and we'll look at these effects in some few minutes. Then lastly, we do have the base class name, and this one should be the name of the base class whereby we want to inherit the members from. So quickly, let me just go through this example, then we can do an actual example from our environment. So I define a class I'm calling person, and actually this one is my base class. Within the base class, I declare weight, height, and age of type integer, and they are in the public section. And therefore, it means that those members can be inherited in my new class, the fact that they are public. In the public section, I also define an accept function that will enable me to read the height, weight, and the age of the person. Then next, I've been able to define another class, which I'm calling student, but I tell the compiler that this class will be able to inherit from all members from a class we are calling person, which is this class. And all the members within that class will become public in my new class. And that's why you see I do have the public access specifier within my program. So we can just continue, and just a minute. So within the public class, within the class we are calling student, I have also decided that I'm going to add some additional behavior, and this additional behavior will be behavior relating to a student. That since I want to capture information about the student, I also want to capture the registration number of those students, and that's why you see I have been able to declare registration number as a member of that class. Then we have a function that is known as void get registration number. This function will be used to capture the registration number of the student. Then I enter my class again. Then look at what is happening down there. I also do have another class, which I'm calling staff. Still, this class is inheriting members from the class we are calling person. So in short, this class we are calling staff can be able to have access to weight, height, age, and this function, which we are calling accept. So we can continue. But because there's some additional behavior we are adding about the staff, I do have a variable which I'm calling the staff number. And I do have a function that's supposed to enable me to get the staff number and supposed to allow the user to enter the staff number from the keyboard. And that's what we have. Then within the main function, I've been able to create a function which I've been able to create an object of type student. In this case, student is my derived class number 1. And with that, I've been able to accept, or I've been able to invoke the function which we are calling accept. If we look at our program, this function we are calling accept has been defined in a class we are calling person. But the fact that I've done some form of inheritance, I can be able to access that member using the object of the class we are calling student. So after you have been able to do inheritance, then you can be able to have access of all the public members within your class. Then we also call the member functions inside the class student. So I've also been able to call a function, I've also been able to display the information, registration number, weight, height, and the age. The reason of this, it's obvious that registration number, weight, and height and age have been declared in my public section. The fact that they have been declared in the public section, they can be accessed outside the class definition. And we shall do this example in a minute. Then I create another object of type class, which we are calling, sorry, an object of type staff, which I'm calling st. Then I call the same function again, st.accept. Again, it's a function that's found within the class we are calling person. But the fact that I've done some public inheritance, then I can be able to, or I can be able to read, or I can be able to access that member after I've done inheritance. Then I call the member, which we are calling the get staff number. This is a function which we have been able to declare within the staff class. Then the fact that the staff number, the weight, and the height are all public members, then I'm able to access those members within, sorry, I'm actually able to access those members within the main function. Just a minute. I want us to finish so that we can do the program together. So I've also been able to read the staff number. I think there's something that's not able to show, but allow me to start the code block, sorry, and allow me to start the Visual Studio Code so that we can be able to do the program and see how inheritance it's been achieved in that program before we look at the modes of inheritance. So just 1 minute, the program is just launching. But if you have some questions so far on inheritance, you can also let me know. Hussein, does it mean you're not seeing the screen from your side?
No, I'm okay now.
Okay, okay. Okay, let me share the screen so that we can do the program. So we can call this maybe inheritance dot cpp. So hash include. Are we able to see my code from your side?
Yes.
Okay, okay, thank you. So hash include the iostream file. Then using namespace std. And I define my first class person. For this class person, so for this class we are calling person, I declare some public members. So these members will be int or int weight, height, sorry, height, and maybe we have the age of the person, sorry, comma, age. Then I also declare a function that will be accepting those information, void accept. And quickly we can read out the information, see out, enter the weight. EDL, see in, weight. Can just copy instead of repeating the same thing. V, enter the height. Enter the age. This one should be the age of the person. This one should be height. Sorry, this one should be height. Sorry, height. Hope I'm having the right spelling. Oops. So we have the height and the age. And that's what the base class does. So let me just put a comment, base class. Or some books will call it the superclass, whichever name you want to use. Then later, I now define another class, class student. Then I inherit the members from the base class. Either I can make them public, private, or protected. So let me just make them public. And I want to access from a class we are calling person. Sorry. So that's how we have been able to do inheritance. And that means at this point, this class we are calling student can access the weight, the height, and the age. So I declare another function int registration number. And this one, I also want them to make them to become or to be in my public section so that I can access them outside the class declaration. So void get student, get registration number, get reg number. It's just a function. And say cout, enter student registration number. Registration number. Sorry, EDL. We did that registration number and so it in a variable we are calling registration number. And that's what that class does. This one is some additional behavior within my class, because I've been able to inherit but do something additional within my class. Then we shall also declare the class staff. Then we also inherit from the class we are calling public, a class we are calling person. So within this class, I'll also declare some public members. And for the class, I want to declare int staff number. And I can have a function that will accept that void get staff number. That's a user-defined function. Then we can say cout enter staff number. EDL. In, we read the staff number. So at that point, we are done with that class. I think we just need to have a semicolon to tell the compiler that's where our class ends in. Then we move on to the main function, int main. So within my main function, number one, I'm going to create object of student type. And this is how we do it. The name of the class is student. Then I can just create an object I call S. The name doesn't matter, provided you are going to be consistent within your program when you are calling that function. Then we move on. So with that, sorry, with this object, first I want to call the function which we are calling accept, s.accept. But if you look at where we have accept, you'll find that accept has been defined in another class. But the fact that I've been able to inherit that member, then I can be able to access the member within my new class. Then I also call the new member, the member within that class, s.get registration number. So I move on, create object of type staff. So we have a class we are calling staff, which is a derived class. staff, then I can just call the object st, because the objects are not supposed to be having the same name. St dot get staff number, which is our function. Sorry, get staff number. We do have that function found in a class we are calling staff. Then st dot, I also want to call the function which we are calling accept. So there's something you can now be able to see. The function known as accept has to be defined in one class, but our derived functions can be able to access those functions. So you don't need to keep on defining the same logic over and over again. Then we can just say display information. Information. So see out student registration number. I can just say I use the object, and the reason why I'm calling this member within the main function is because this member has been defined in the public section. If this member was in the private section or in a protected section, that member won't be accessible in my program. So s dot registration number. Then we can just output the rest, copy paste. So student age, and this one is s dot age. Then we have weight of the student. Weight of the student, s dot weight. Then we have them weight. After 8 weight, we have the height. Then we can have s dot height. It's the wrong spelling. I love to change that, or I just leave it the way it is. Then I have the following: display staff information. So this one displays student information. So allow me just to copy this. We don't need to keep on rewriting the same thing. So staff number, that one is kept in a variable. So the name of the object for the staff will be st dot, then we have the staff number. Staff age will be st dot age. This one will be st dot weight, st dot height, because they are the same variable. I can even just have staff and staff also. And that's what we're having. This is student weight. This is student weight. So now let's try to run this short program we have written and see what we shall be getting, whether inheritance will be working in our program. So we can give it some few minutes for the terminal to start. Then if there are questions, we can ask before we move on. So we just give it some few minutes. It's just starting. So after running my program, it's now asking me to enter the student registration number 111. Weight of the student, we have 70. Height of the student, maybe let's say this student it's 7. Age, maybe it's 50. Sorry, maybe age of the student it's 19. Then we now move on and call the function for accepting, but now this one, the values will be assigned to the object of type staff. So enter staff number, maybe the staff number will be 998, weight 90, height maybe 6, age maybe this is going to be 35, and I think there's something I just forgot to add was the end line. But let's just see how the output look like. The student registration number has been displayed. The age of the student is 19, the weight is 70, and the height is 7. Then we now proceed and display the staff number, which is 998. The staff age to be 35, the weight of the staff to be 90, and the height to be 6. If you look at that program, it's very clear that we have just defined one accept function, but for the class we are calling student, for the class we are calling staff, they have been able to inherit members from that class. If you look at, for example, the members we are calling registration number in our program, these members have been defined in a base class, and the other classes can actually be able to access them, including the main function. That's what we call inheritance when we are writing our program. The fact that you can define a member and use it in another class without you having to define the logic again, it's what we call inheritance. So I just pause there. If there are questions, I get them before we move on to the next concept. Class. Any person could be having a question before we move on. Any question, class, or do we proceed? Ross, do we proceed? The code will be shared on the platform. The code will be shared on the platform after the class. Yeah, let's first do the class first. Elisha from Gaba, are we okay? Elisha, are we at the same page? Or he has just disappeared? Amil from Pakistan, are we at the same page? Amil Karil, are we at the same page? Mr. Daniel, are we at the same page? I just want to confirm before we move on. Okay, if there are questions, then people will be able to ask. Let me just proceed with the next thing. Bryce, I will be able to I'll be able to upload all the programs on the Odell platform before the day ends. And most of them, they are there, but I'll be able to upload them. So we look at the next thing on inheritance. It's about the mode of inheriting. Whenever you are deriving from the base class, you need to be able to tell the compiler what mode of inheritance are you using. And we can be able to have 3 modes of inheritance. You can either inherit members as public, you can inherit members to become protected, and we will speak about what we mean by protected members. Or you can also be able to make members to become private when we are inheriting members. Anytime you use the private inheritance, all the members of the base class, first, this is something we need to know even before we discuss the modes, that all the private members of a class can never be inherited or can never be accessed in the new class. So in short, we cannot be able to inherit a private member. And that means either we are going to be inheriting the protected member, and we are also going to be inheriting the public member. The fact that a private member can only be accessed within the class it has been defined, then it's obvious that that member can never be inherited and can never be accessible in a new class. Even if we are going to inherit that member will not be accessible at all within the new class. So if you are writing your program and you want to make a member not to be accessible within your base class, then consider defining that class as a private member. Let me just repeat this again. When you are writing a program and you want to make a certain member within your base class, and you don't want that member to be accessible in any other subsequent class we are going to be inheriting, then consider declaring that member in your public section. But let's see the rules we shall be following once we inherit a member either by public, by private, or by public, by private, or by protected member. So when we do the public inheritance, or when we say that the member is public, like what we have done in the program, then the public members and the protected members of the base class shall become, the public members of the base class shall become public in the new class. If we have some protected member within that class, that member will remain to become protected, while the private member of the base class will now become private in the new class, although that member can never be accessed in our new class. So please note that those rules, because in the exam, these are things we are going to be asking you. You can be given a sample program, maybe, and once you're given a sample program, that sample program has some type of inheritance. Then the question can ask you, what shall be the effect of this inheritance? And you're given some kind of choices. You can only be able to answer those, or you can be able to answer those kind of questions once you know the effects of this kind of inheritance. Or maybe you can be given a question or a sample question or a sample program, and out of that sample program, maybe we have been able to have some kind of, or a mode of inheritance. Then the program or the question could be asking you, what will be the output of that program? Definitely, I want to understand, I want you all, in that case, I'm testing whether you understand what are the effects of the different types of inheritance. So in the exam, you'll get some technical questions, but you can only answer these technical questions if you understand the notes very well. Because you'll get some questions where you have been given a program, you are taught to give the sample output, or maybe you are given a scenario where you have to write the program. So just prepare yourself from all corners. The way the exam has been said, it's not an hard exam if you have understood the concepts. But if you have not understood the concept in any exam, may it be my exam, may it be any exam you are doing outside Queer, then that exam will become challenging for you. So please try to understand the basics, try to understand the fundamentals of what you are teaching, and you'll find the exam to be user-friendly. You'll be able to pass the exam. But if you are trying to cram the codes, if you are trying to cram the content, then programming becomes very challenging for you. So we look at the protected inheritance. So once we inherit a certain class and we specify that the access specifier will be protected, then automatically the public and the protected members of that class becomes protected members. That's something you need to know. We are going to be all, the effect of that inheritance will make a public member to become protected in the new class. The protected members become protected in the new class, or they still remain to be protected in the new class, while the private members cannot be inherited. Even though we are going to inherit those members will not be accessible within the new class at all. You can't access a private member outside the class where that private member has been defined in. Then we now look at the private inheritance, and this one will make the public and the protected members to become private in the new class. And once they become private, it means that we cannot even be able to access them outside the current class definition. So this is something you need to be very careful when you are inheriting. If you want to make a certain member, or if you want to do private inheritance, then you need to be very careful that that member cannot be accessed outside the class definition. The same thing with protected inheritance. Once we define, or once we inherit through the protected inheritance, you cannot be able to access the functions. You cannot be able to access them. Sorry, you cannot be able to access the functions. You cannot be able to access the members of that class outside the class definition. So let's just look at this sample, or this C++ program that will be able to show us that once we define a certain member in a class, that member we cannot be able to inherit, but the base class object can be able to access that member. So let me just quickly go through the code. Then we will be able to see whether there's something else we can be able to do with them, with what remaining with inheritance. So I've defined a class we are calling class A, and these are the kind of programs you'll be getting in the exam. Small programs testing on a certain concept, then they tell you what is the expected output of that program. And for you to know the expected output, then you need to be able to understand the structure, or you need to be able to understand most of the basic things relating to what we are being tested on. So we do have a class we are calling A, which we have been able to define 3 members. One, we have X defined as a public member, Y as a protected member. Let me just speak about a protected member. The fact that we cannot inherit a member from a certain class, or the fact that we cannot inherit a certain or a private member from a class, we always bring in that visibility mode, which we are calling protected, so that if you do have a private member within a class and you want to be able to access that member outside the class definition, then you can consider declaring or defining that member in your protected section, because at least with that we can be able to access that member outside the class definition, because we have already said that a private member can only be accessed within that class, and therefore we cannot be able to inherit that private member. But sometimes you could be working a program whereby you do have a class, a base class, that has some certain members, and you want to be able to acquire them in another class. That will not be possible if you are using the private member. And maybe you don't want to make that member to become public. You don't want to access it within the main function. At that point, you can be able to use the protected specifier. So we have X defined as a protected member, and Z has also been, or has been defined within the scope of the private member. So let's see what happens. So I now define a class I'm calling B, whereby I'm inheriting from the class known as A as public. The fact that we have been able to inherit the member, sorry, we have been able to inherit the class as public, then we say that the public members become public. The protected members become protected in the new class. And the private members cannot be accessible from the derived class. And that's what you can be able to see, that X becomes public, Y becomes protected, while Z cannot be accessed from this class. Then I do have a class we are calling C that has still been able to accept the same class, but in a different mode as a protected member. In protected mode, we said the public and protected member all become protected in the new class. And that's where you find X and Y, whereby X is public, it's now going to be converted to become protected. While it's a protected member, it becomes protected, while Z still will not be accessible within our new class, the fact that it's a private member. Then we do have another class D, whereby we are now inheriting members. So we are inheriting members from a certain class using the private mode. And we said all that one, the public and the protected member will become private in the new class. X and Y have now been able to turn their feasibility mode to become private. Although X was public and Y was public, by the virtue of that we have been able to inherit the member using private, then they now become private in the new class. But Z, which is private, will not be accessible from the class which we are calling D. And this is just a simple summary of what you have been able to speak. So once you have a public member and you define that, or you use the public inheritance, then the public member becomes public in that class. If we inherit using the protected inheritance, that public member becomes protected, and the private member, or once we inherit using private mode, it becomes private. So if we have a protected member, sorry, if we do have a protected member in the base class, and we do inheritance using the public, that member shall become protected. The protected members will also become protected in the new class, while the private members, while we have a protected member and we inherit through private, the member becomes private by default. It's obvious that irrespective of what member we are inheriting from, that member will never enter private member, that member will never be accessible, or it's going to be hidden in the new class. So any private member can never be accessed by our derived class. That's all what that table means. Before we move on, and could we be having any question? Any question that's not clear so far? Okay, I can see the public chat, it's clean. I can see we don't have a question, so we just move on. So we look at what happens once we use the different modes. Public members will be accessible within the same class. Public members will be accessible in the derived class, and public members will also become available outside the class. And if you look at the programs you have been doing, you find that anytime we define a member as public, we can even be able to access that member even within the main function. So a public member can be accessed within the same class, derived class, and even outside the classes. For the protected member, yes, we can access it within the same class, that is the base class. We can also access the member outside or in a new class or in a derived class. That is possible. But for a protected member, that member cannot be accessed outside the class or outside the derived class and the base class. And what that will mean is, if I do have a function and I try to make, or I use the mode of inheritance to become protected, that function will not be accessible in my main function. Before we proceed, I'll just show you an example. Then for the private members, they can all be accessed within the same class. They can't be accessed outside the derived class. They can't be accessed outside the class they have been defined in. So let me just share the same code and we just try to tweak the program. So let me share the same code we are working on. So it's the same window. So allow me just to change this one to become a protected. So this one becomes protected. And this one also, we say we are going to inherit via to become protected. Let's see what happens to my program. Because we have already said that a protected member cannot be accessed outside the class. That means these members, we cannot be able, and actually we already have an error. So if you look at the error, it's function accept declared at line 7, it's inaccessible. Because if you have a member that is protected, then you cannot be able to access that member outside the class definition. But if I just change this to become public, then that error will just disappear. Public and public. So you just find the error has just disappeared. This one should not be able to disappear. Just a minute, I can run the code. Yes, you can see the error has disappeared. Now it's able to recognize accept because we are now doing public inheritance, whereby the members can be accessed outside the class declaration. If I try to use the private, then we shall also get the same error. So private and another class, we also make it become private. So you'll find that we still have the same error, that members cannot be accepted or they cannot be accessible because these members are actually outside the class, have been defined using the private member, and a private member can only be accessed within that particular class. So let me just revert back to the public so that we can make the program to work. So class, could we be having a question before we proceed? Any question from the students? Father Ezekiel, do you have a question? Yeah, looks okay. Saying yes.
Hello, Molly. This kind of mode of inheritance.
Which one? The protected.
Yeah, the protected one.
Okay, good question. So let me answer the question. I think it's going to clear some. So I said, if you do have a private member within a class, that private member cannot be accessed outside the class declaration. And you might want, or you might write a program and you want to be able to either acquire that member in a new class, because by default, if that member is private, then once you try to inherit the class, then that member by default becomes private and it's not going to be accessible within my class. The reason why someone maybe could be inheriting using this mode of protected, it's a case whereby you want to inherit a certain member, but you don't want that member to be accessed in the outside class declaration. So you might, for example, have some kind of a sensitive data that you're getting from a class A to class B, but you don't want a public member to be able to access that member. So for you to protect that member, you can now be able to inherit using protected. I don't know whether Hussein, maybe I've answered your question as expected.
Yes.
I hope it's much clearer.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So do we proceed? I just hope we can be able to finish the class at around 9:45 today. Is that agreeable for all of us? So that people can get that time they are saying they want to get for them to be able to do their studies. So allow me to look at the next thing relating to inheritance. So we look at the types of inheritance, and these are very straightforward. So you can either have what we call single inheritance, and single inheritance will be a case whereby the derived class will be inheriting from a single class. But you can also have what we call the multiple inheritance, whereby you have a single class trying to inherit from more than one base class. I think this is the example I'll be able to pick. We also do have the hierarchical inheritance. The hierarchical inheritance will be a case whereby we can have the base class, we can have a derived class acting as a base class of another derived class. Maybe once the diagrams come on, then they'll be very clear. We also do have the mode level. The mode level is a case whereby you can be able to have a derived class, or we can have the base class, then we create a derived class. But we now have another derived class getting the members from the derived class. So in this case will be a case whereby you find the derived class will become a derived class and a base class for another class. Hybrid, it's obvious that we could be combining the four modes or the four types of inheritance: the single inheritance, multiple inheritance, hierarchical inheritance, and multi-level. So in a nutshell, let's go through them. Then we can maybe pick one more example, then we can call it a semester. Because I believe I cannot be able to finish all about object-oriented programming, and that's why we have the object-oriented programming too. Sorry. So we said the single inheritance will be a type of inheritance whereby we have a derived class inheriting from only one, base class. So this is how it looks like. So I do have a class which I'm calling the base class, but you find the derived class will all inherit the properties from a single base class. And the syntax is very straightforward. So class, the name of the derived class, full colon, which means inheritance, the access mode, which can be either public, protected, or private, and the name of the base class we are getting the attributes from. And I think that's the example we have just done. So we do have a class I'm calling vehicle in my program. And within the vehicle, I have a function which I'm calling, it's actually not a function, it's actually it's a constructor. The fact that vehicle has the same name as the class. And what I want to display is that this is the base class, nothing else. Then next I have a derived class car, and this car will be now inheriting the members from vehicle as public. But I go ahead and create an object of type car, which is my derived class. And the output will be 1. This is the base class. Although we see that a derived class cannot be able to access the constructors, the derived class can be able to call the the default constructor found in the base class. So once I create the object, we see automatically the program will be able to execute sorry, the program will be able to execute the constructor or the constructor. And that's what has happened in this program. The fact that I've been able to create an object of the derived class car, then we now call the constructor, which is known as vehicle. And in the vehicle, we are executing this is the base class. And that means this class, which we are calling car, can have access to the public members of the class we are calling vehicle. So we look at the multiple inheritance, and this is a case whereby we can be able to have a class inheriting from more than one class. Or in short, we have a derived class that will be getting, or that will be acquiring properties which are either data and functions from one or more base class. And this is how the syntax look like in a graphical manner. We have a derived class that's inheriting from class B1, B2, all the way to Bn. And in this case, Bn will be your last class. The syntax for that inheritance will be as follows. So class, the keyword class, the name of the derived class, then full colon, the access mode for each of that class, because you can combine the mode. You can find, for example, the first class, I want to inherit using public mode. The next class, I want to inherit using the private mode, and so on and so on. So that's how we shall be able to do the public inheritance, then the body of the class. I think this is just a simple example, then we can look at our own example, then we proceed from there. So we do have a class we are calling number one that has a public member known as X. And the work of that public member, it's supposed to get the value of X and assign it to a variable we are calling X, full stop. We do have a class number two that will be able to get a number which we are calling Y and assign that number to a variable we are calling Y. That is the class number two, which is still a base class. Then we do have, or we now define a that class, which we are calling sum. And in this case, sum will be able to inherit from number one class and number two. And what this class does, it just does the summation. It takes the value of X, the value of the first number, adds to the second number, and displays the sum. And we shall look at this program in some few minutes. So number three is what we call the multi-level inheritance. And using this type of inheritance, we can be able to make a derived class to become a base class. If you look at the graphic in the next picture, I do have a class I'm calling C, which is my, sorry, we do have a class which I'm, sorry, let me just start from class B. So class B, it's my first base class. But from this base class, sorry, from this base class, I now get a derived class, which I'm calling A. But if you look at the class B is also getting some attributes from the class C. So once we have a certain class inheriting some properties from another class, but at the same time, we also find out that the same class will become a base class of another class that becomes multi-level inheritance. And I think this is an example which is there. We can just go through it very fast, then we do our program for the day. So we have a class which we are calling numbers. And within that class, I've been able to define a public member, which I'm calling Y, then assign a value of 5, then the end of that class. I have a class number 2, which is called, or class number 2, inheriting from the public numbers, which is the first class I defined. And within that, X has been set to a value of 7. Then let's look at what happens in this case. So I define another class known as sum, but now sum will be inheriting the members from numbers. And numbers was already a derived class. Numbers already was a base class up there. So this is what we are now calling, this is now what we are calling, numbers was already a derived class. The fact that numbers was deriving some attributes from numbers 1. So numbers 2, it's a derived class. The fact that it's getting some properties from a class we are calling numbers 1. But in the class sum, numbers has now become a base class. So this class we are calling sum, it's getting its properties from another derived class, which we are calling numbers. So you find it's a class playing 2 roles. At one point, it's a derived class. At the other point, it becomes a derived class. And that's what we call the multi-level inheritance. Then we can be able to do the summation of the program. And within the main function, we have been able to create an object which we are calling sum, after which we have been able to create an object we are calling sum, and then we now call our members, and we shall be able to see that we are able to invoke the constructors in the derived class sum. So I think we can do a program before we look at the hierarchical inheritance and before we look at the hybrid. Actually, there's nothing to look at in terms of the hybrid and the hierarchical. Let me look at the most important two. The multi-level and what we are calling the multiple inheritance. So we can just do some small programs, not lengthy ones. But for the purpose of the exam, you need to be able to write some bigger programs. Maybe at the end of the lesson, I'll be able to share with you some sample programs you can be able to look at from your side. So let me share my Visual Studio Code so that we write the program together. So we can call this function, we can just call it multiple dot CPP. So include IOStream file using namespace std class. So we call, let me, for example, call this one class A. Class A. And assume that this one shall have a variable. So in the public section, I declare the following. Int X. That's my first class. Then I have another class, public B. This is class B. Class B. And for this one, I declare a member which I'm calling Y in the public section. Public, so int Y. So we do have those members. So we have those members defined in my two class, but I define another class sum. So in sum, I want to inherit from the two classes. So public A, comma, and public B. So that's how we do them. That's how we do the multiple inheritance. And within this class, I'm just going to define a function, public, or let me just call it sum. In the public section, I define this sum, which is a constructor taking two parameters, int, or let me just leave it. It's okay. Int, sorry, sum, and what this constructor will do, see out, is the sum. The sum is \t. We take the value of x plus y. Remember, the constructor will be called automatically when the program starts, so we don't need to keep on calling the constructor. I think, let me just pass some two values, int. So I pass int a and int b. So this one becomes the placeholder for x and y respectively. So the value of x will be assigned to the value we are going to pass through parameter a, and the value of y will be assigned the value we shall pass through parameter b. So that's how the class looks like. We have just used a constructor because we don't, it's not a match for us to have a constructor. You can have your own function. But for the purpose of devising the constructor, I've decided we do the calculation and we output the values of the program using the constructor. So within the main function, int main, and I'm going to call my class, sorry, I'm going to define my function class, sorry, I'm going to create an object of type sum s. Then I pass the two values because I've said my constructor will take two values, two integers. So maybe the value is 5, and 7.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes?
Must we assign the x to a, or we can use still a plus b?
Yeah, we can do that. But the fact that we do have x and y in our program, that's why it's not good that we declare variables and we don't assign them values. Okay. The fact that I've declared x and y, it's good that we assign them values. Yes, I can say the sum is a plus b. But the fact that we have been able to define x and y within our program and we have been able to inherit the members, we need to give them their values. Okay. So return 0. So let's see what this program will be able to give us. So I just run the program. So right click and run the code. And we can wait for it to be able to come on the screen. Just a minute, let me kill the first one. So actually, we have in the output, the sum is 12. And that's what the program does. So through the multiple inheritance, if we can just go through the program, I've defined the first class with a public member X. I also define another class known as B with a public member Y. In the class we are calling sum, we now inherit the value, the attributes from A and B. And using the constructor, then we have been able to pass two values of type integer. Those values will be received by A and B. And after we receive the values, the constructor will be able to assign the first parameter, which is A, will be assigned to X. The second parameter, which is B, will be assigned to Y. Then we now take the value of X and Y and add them together and display them on the keyboard, on the screen. Then within our main function, what we just have is we create an object, but because we know that we do have a constructor that takes two parameters, then we pass the the parameters 5 and 7, and that means A will receive the value of 5, B shall receive the value of 7. Then get the sum and display the sum on the screen. And after that, there's nothing else we are doing. The program just ends. Any question on that program before we move on? Okay, so let's look at how we do the mod level. So mod level .cpp. So hash include. So today we are not doing the break. Let's just finish by 9:50 at most. We should be done. Hash include iStream using namespace std. Then we have a class I'm calling class M, which is a base class. And within this class, I define a member, public member, which is int x. It's the same program we are working on, int x. Then I have another class B. And this class will now inherit the members of a public B. Sorry, public A, sorry. A semicolon on line number 6. So this one, we now declare another member public on the public section, and I'm going to call it int y. So that means the class we are calling B can have access to the variable we are calling X. And the fact that we have done the public inheritance, then X becomes a public member in the class we are calling B. And lastly, I have a class public sum, which will inherit members from the class we are, public, there should be something wrong somewhere. Class sum, inheriting all members from the class we are calling B as public. Before we even proceed, it's obvious that we are going to be inheriting X and Y because X was already inherited by class B and meant to become public. So it's possible to inherit a member and also inherit that member again within your program. So we can just have the sum, the same thing, sum int A, comma, int B. Then we can just say X, we assign it the value of A, Y, we assign the value of B. And we can say cout. Cout, the sum is X plus Y. So that marks the end of that class. I can now define my main function, int main. And I define my object for the class sum S, and I pass my two values, maybe 9, and 8, or 7, whichever, then return. If we run this program, then we shall also be getting the same thing. I think we have an error somewhere. Inaccessible something. Let me see. Just a minute. We have an error somewhere.
You have not written return O.
Yes?
You have not written return O.
Return 0. Although that one should not be affecting the previous line. just seems we have an error that there's something that's not accessible, and I don't know why that's the case. Some declared it's not accessible. Let's see. Class sum. So we just have, oh, I've seen. This is the problem of anytime you define a member and you don't specify the scope of that member, then by default, that member becomes private. So the program is treating this member sum to become private, and therefore we cannot be able to access that member outside the class declaration. So this one needs to be in the public section, and that one will now make the error to disappear. So we can run the code, and you should be able to see that the program displays that the sum is 16. So that's another way to do the inheritance. It's either you're inheriting from a single class, from multiple class, or you can make a derived class to become a base class. And that's what we have done. This class we are calling public. It's a base class in this case, but in this case, it's a derived class. And that's what we mean by multi-level inheritance. Any person could be having a question before we look at the last two, then we call it a day. Any question, class? Fiona, do we have a question? Elisha from Gaba, could we be having a question? Elisha from Gaba. Any question? It's like people just come, they join the meeting and just disappear. Some people could even be doing farming and they pretend they're in the class. Bryce, do you have a question? Are we having people in this class? Cynthia, Millie. David Sudan, any question? Ian, any question?
No question.
Are people really in this class, or they just come and attended and disappeared?
No question.
Okay. So we look at the last type of inheritance. Let me share the file. So we have the hierarchical inheritance, whereby in this type of inheritance, more than one subclass will inherit from a single base class. So if you have a case whereby we have a single, or we have, let's say, like 3 subclass all inheriting from a single base class, then we do call that one hierarchical inheritance. This is just a small program or a sample program that shows you how we can be able to implement them hierarchical inheritance. So we have been able to define a class we are calling numbers. Within that class, we have public members X and Y, and we end our class. So that means X and Y can be accessed in another class. Then I define another class which we are calling summation, and summation will be accessing or will be inheriting from the class we are calling summation publicly, meaning that it can be able to access X and Y. And what the function does, it's able to display the sum of 2 numbers, that is X and Y. That's what the function does. We also do have another function, sorry, another class, which we are calling summation number 2, still inheriting from the same base class, which we are calling numbers. And it's implementing a function we are calling display, whereby it takes the values of x, it's been assigned 17, while y will be assigned the value of 19. And also, again, that function displays the sum. And after we have been able to create the functions, or after we have been able to create the objects, then we are able to create the display for each of that object. So number one, we have been able to create an object called sum1 for a class we are calling summation1. This is a derived class. Then we display this. Sorry, we call the function display for that particular object. We also create another object which we are calling sum2 of class known as summation2, and we call the display for the same. So it's possible for you to have as many as derived class in editing from a single class. And lastly, we can have the hybrid inheritance, whereby we can be able to combine all those different types of inheritance, single inheritance, multiple inheritance, multi-level, and the hierarchical inheritance. And this is just an example. For example, this is a case whereby it's a case of hierarchical inheritance, whereby you find two classes, two subclasses inheriting from a single base class. This is a case of single inheritance in the same program, whereby we find class E inheriting from class G, which is a base class, and many other types of inheritance. The more complicated the program gets, the more also the inheritance will get. And depending on the nature of the problem you are solving at the end, then you might find yourself in either of these kind of inheritance in your program. And you'll also get some additional programs on my notes. So this one topic that's remaining, and I want you to go and read it on your own. It's the last topic on object-oriented programming. We do call this polymorphism. That ability of a certain object to have more than one forms is what we call polymorphism. And I think that's where I want to end the class for today, and also possibly end the semester so that people can start revising for the exam. But remembering that on Saturday we are going to be having a cut starting from 2:30. So I can get some few questions before we call it a class, if they are there. 10 questions class before we call it a semester and a class for today. Any particular question?
Good morning, sir.
Yes, Father Vincent.
Yeah, I'm asking about the Saturday's cards.
Pardon?
I'm talking about the Saturday
Yes.
class. I mean the cards.
Yes.
So I'm asking, where the card we cover?
We'll up to what we have covered today, from day one up to today.
Okay.
Okay. Another question?
And the exam will cover up to what we've covered today as well?
Up to polymorphism.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So there are some questions on polymorphism, but I've seen students are insisting on having some time to revise. But in the event that you are not able to understand the concept, then you can maybe let me know. I schedule like 1 hour class. I clarify on the issues on polymorphism. But it's very straightforward.
Sure.
Yes, Collins. Now you are speaking.
And for the cut, can you please add some more time?
How much time do you need for the cut? You know, firstly, something I've noticed. Some of us are copying from one another. And once I just detect that you are copied from one another, the person who has copied and the other person, even if your program is right, I'll give you, all of you, I'll give you a 0. Because we don't expect students to be exchanging files when they are doing these exams. I have been marking the cuts. I've seen a lot of similar wrong programs. And for that, I usually award a 0. This case will be even more worse during the exam. If I just detect that you are cheating, then on our side, we can consider that one as a cheating incident where students were exchanging file. Make sure that when you are doing your cut, you are doing your cut alone as a person, not as a group. You can't tell me that Ian write a program, use a variable X, another guy used the same thing, where Ian puts a semicolon, the other guy puts a semicolon, and all the programs are wrong. We cannot be wired to think in the wrong way, the same way. That's something I don't agree on. But on the cut, we shall have exactly 1 hour, not 50 minutes. Collins, I hope that solves your problem.
Hello.
Yes.
Here we are talking about typing fast, and some of us, like me, I'm not a fast typer. I don't type fast.
You know, Nani Collins, you know, time is also part of the exam. Even in the exam we are going to be beginning next week, those exams will be timed. So
what if we say,
yes,
put somewhere you scan, then we upload the answers. We write manually because me, my writing, I'm fast.
you are right. Okay, in the exam, that's something I can provide. But in the exam, you can have 2 options. You can either type the questions, or you can write them on your book, scan and upload. The options will be there in the exam.
What about the cut?
I can also provide that, but for every question, you ensure that you have your registration number on every page.
Okay, sir.
Yes. Okay. If you're not good at typing, then you can use the other option that you're good at. So even in the exam, you can have a scanner installed on the mobile phone so that you are able to upload your questions, if at all you are writing them from your end. Any other more questions? I'm picking questions relating to the content and also relating to the exam. More questions, please.
Mwalimu, I suggest. Hello.
Yes, please.
Mwalimu, I suggest utatuma nini hizo samples za questions zenye zitatusaidia kupractice hizo.
You know the problem, Hussein, with these online exams, it's very hard for you to provide some sample questions. Remember, if I give you some sample questions, I'll give you the past papers in C++. In the past, this exam has not been online. This is the first time we are doing an online exam. And it's very hard for me to give a sample question because they are not actually there. This is the first time we are doing online exams. So the sample questions are not somewhere. And you can even take the cuts. Those are some sample questions you can see. How can the exam be tested?
So the exams are different.
Yes, you know, initially it was the written exam, but now the fact that we have the virtual exams, you know, we cannot have the same exam being, because, for example, I cannot ask you what's a constructor in an exam, because that one you just go straight to the note, copy and paste.
And okay, I hope it's not requiring a lot of thinking.
Definitely, yeah, it requires a lot of high level of thinking. High level.
With the limited time.
The time will be enough. I can tell you the time will be enough. But you know, the problem is students, they are trying to get these answers online. And by doing that, they are just eating on their own airtime instead of trying to answer the question. Some are coming together, maybe they form a cyber like in Rongai. There are 10 of them doing the exam. First, every student will be doing their own different kind of questions for this exam. Even if you come together in a cyber, that one will not help. The questions will be totally different. Whatever Hussein will be doing for question number 8 will be totally different from what Ross will be doing for question number 8 at the same time. And the question, you might do a total different exam from the other student.
So
Yes. Mm.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
Did you resolve the exam colliding?
Bryce, I think that your case is very complicated. You know, we are using the teaching timetable for these exams. I don't know how we can have a collide. How are you learning? Because that's a question we are asking as a department and as a university. Because the exam timetable is based on the teaching timetable. Bryce.
Possibility of coming to school on January, is there any possibility?
We just remain alive that we are coming back on January unless there are going to be other, you know, we have been told that all schools are coming back in January. So we just go by that directive. Unless otherwise, we are prepared to have the students back. At the end of the day, we can't have a COVID-free nation just like that. This is maybe a disease that can even take 5 years. So people have to try and move on. That's the argument for every person globally. But in case there are going to be any other information, then we'll be able to tell you. But from where I stand at the moment, students are supposed to be coming back in January. But the university will communicate officially about that. Do you have more questions?
Then I want to ask one question.
Yes.
Then for the exam timetable, I'm having the one that was released, I think on November 17th.
Yes.
I don't know whether we have a new one now.
Yes, by the course of this week, we should be having a new one. And once it's there, we'll be able to see. But it's on addressing those issues that we are, you know, what we are trying to do as a university, we are taking the teaching timetable and we turn it to become the final exam timetable. But it's like most of us, we change the time for these timetables, and that's why we find we have a problem with the final timetable. But by Wednesday, the other timetable will be coming out. Also, secondly, please, in terms of clearance, please just start clearing your school fees in advance. I have seen students who have cleared school fees the last minute, but they missed the exam. Kindly, to avoid the last minute rush, try to clear issues of finance in advance, because I know Odell will be cleaning the system and they're going to be adding the people who have been able to clear the school fees by the end of this week. Make sure that we are able to clear our school fees on time so that we are not inconvenienced when we are doing our first exam or the second exam.
So they will be cleaning the system as of Friday moving forward or before?
Yeah, I think you see what happened last time. I think Kian, you are a victim.
Yeah.
So when they start cleaning, they want to see how many people have cleared the school fees. Then based on those who have cleared the school fees, they'll now be able to add them again to the system. So I believe they'll be blocking the accounts. Then they now unblock the accounts based on those who are paid.
So have they given a date when they'll start doing that?
Okay, that's what I'm saying. Let's not wait for that date. I know by Friday they will.
Okay.
Because last time what I saw, it's a case where students are paying on Sunday, then the exam is on Monday, and they're not able to do the exam. Let's just avoid this last minute ditch to do the exam.
And sir, on our portal, the amount is not showing for that how much we have to pay, because for the units we have amounts, but sometimes we have some additional amounts for the university. So
Yes.
it's not clear how much to pay.
Okay, I think once you look at what you have registered for, the university you shall bill based on that. So based on the units you have been able to register in a certain semester, then the university will take those units and bill them on your portal. So on your portal, you should be able to see how much you are supposed to be paying. But in case there are some things which maybe are not very clear, then try to start following up on them in advance, because it's very traumatizing that I've paid the school fees as a student, but come the first day of the exam, I missed that exam. So if we can just start planning early in advance so that we don't have those issues, then well and good.
Okay.
Yes. But for me, I'm not very conversant with how they do the billing, but I know on my basic, they just bill based on what the student has been able to register.
So there is a question I have posted. I must have missed this. How can I retrieve the content of a private property?
Pardon?
I've posted a question on the chat. I must have missed this.
Yes.
How you can?
Okay, what do you mean by retrieving the content of a private property?
Can it be inherited?
Yeah, that's why I said once you have a private member within a class, that private member will not be accessible within the new class, and therefore you cannot be able to access that variable in the new class. If you want to be able to access it, then consider declaring that member as protected, because in the new class you can access a protected member and a public member, but not a private member.
Okay.
Much welcome. So do we call it a day? Any more questions which needs my attention? Hope not ending about the school fees. Because as I've said, I'm not very conversant on the issues of finance and how they are usually handled, but I'm just trying to inform you, try to clear these things in advance. I know how our finance team works. So I think there are no more questions. First, I want to thank you for journeying with me all through the semester. And I remain very optimistic that number one, the effort we have been able to put in the course will be replicated in the exam. The joy for any student is to pass an exam first. Yes. And my prayers and my hope is that we shall be able to pass the exam. Please don't use some dubious ways to pass this exam. Last year or last semester, we had to cancel like 3 exams because we felt the credibility of those exams could not be assured. We are not trying to see, or we are not looking at a case whereby we are going to cancel an exam, but let's not put ourselves into a case whereby the exam shall be cancelled by the department in liaison with the university. I want to wish you the very best. And next semester, just before did we do object-oriented programming too? Have we done it? Let me just know. Because I'm planning the units for next semester and I want to be able to know. Did we do?
No. No.
I know that's Father Vincent, it's from education. Computer science students. Have we done object-oriented programming too?
No.
Okay.
No.
So
Excuse lecturer. I want to ask, what do you mean by the cancellation that you people did last year and last semester?
Pardon?
You said that last semester, I don't think you said exam was cancelled.
Yes, exams were cancelled.
No.
Yes.
Why?
Okay, this is a long story. Maybe Father Vincent, once you see me along the corridors, we can speak. But
Okay.
but once we detect some cases of cheating from the student, then the department will cancel the exam. Or once we feel that there was a problem on our side in terms of setting the exam, and maybe the exam became available to the students, then the exam will also be cancelled. Or those could be some scenarios. But we are not anticipating that we are going to be cancelling the exam. It's the last thing you would like to do. So thank you so much for joining with me. We'll keep in touch. Let's keep the WhatsApp group very much alive as we move forward. So we can have a blessed day.